definitely had a magical impact on the sport. He was a world-renowned athlete, and that gave him the building blocks for developing a vision about what skating could become.
Although our Hall of Famer is not with us tonight and will be inducted posthumously, it's clear that his spirit and love for skating built a powerful legacy for the sport. From his athletic dedication, his contributions as a builder and pioneer set the stage for skating's growth in Canada and around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, meet George Meagher. George Meagher was born in Kingston, Ontario in 1866. He was best known for his talent on ice, but he was also the co-founder of the Minto Skating Club in Ottawa. In 1891, he won the amateur championship of the world, and 7 years later, in 1898, he won the world professional title. The media of the day described his skating, and I quote, "His repertoire of steps, tricks, and figures is now a long one. Among other things, he can do 23 different grapevines, 14 spins, and 74 figure eights, and over 100 anvils on one foot without stopping." Meagher published 3 books, the most popular being Figure and Fancy Skating, which was published in 1900. Skating in the early days was mostly made up of special designs or figures, which were carved out by the skaters. Meagher was an inventor of many of these designs, which were extremely difficult to trace, but when done well, resulted in beautiful creations. As a result of his knowledge and success, Meagher was also involved in providing skates to the public, and this contributed to the growing popularity of the sport. His career left little time for a family life, but at the age of 47, he married Irene Frances Norma in November 1913. Soon after, they left for England and eventually went on to have 6 children, coming back to Canada in 1915 and settling in Toronto. George Meagher skated in front of European royalty, including Queen Victoria. As well as having a special athletic gift, he was a talented painter, specializing in watercolor, and he surrounded himself with a fine collection of art. George is remembered as a true gentleman, a dedicated father, an innovator, and an artist. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome into the Skate Canada Hall of Fame as an athlete, George Meagher.
Now let's meet an individual who had the privilege of growing up knowing George's remarkable accomplishments and many stories. Ladies and gentlemen, George's granddaughter, please welcome Rita Meagher.
Well, I told myself I wouldn't cry. I won't. Unfortunately, George passed away shortly before I was born, but we have a family to tell stories, so I learned quite a bit about him. Good evening, Mr. Lavoie, Mr. Thompson, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to Skate Canada and all the members of the Hall of Fame Committee, and particularly to Emily Meagher, for having brought us to this very special anniversary gala, and the induction of my grandfather, George Meagher, into the Hall of Fame. Now, George's achievements as a world champion figure skater have been very well presented here. But what was he like as a man? It was from those precious family stories handed down from my grandmother, my mother, and my aunts that I came to know that he was a true Renaissance man. He was quiet, refined, and charming, very well read, an articulate writer, and a good conversationalist, with highly developed social skills, being quite at ease, moving in aristocratic circles, both in Europe and here. When visiting the Rideau Skating Club in Ottawa, he often partnered Lady Minto, wife of the Governor-General, and she herself, of course, was a very highly skilled skater. He helped to form the Minto Skating Club. and he also played hockey and wrote about it, just for fun. Passionate about figure skating and always striving for perfection in it. George was never burdened with false modesty or coyness, but he did have a strong sense of self-discipline and an admirable set of ethics, which he applied to all aspects of his life and his career. His advice, in a couple of his books, I believe, his advice to young skaters was, let your head rule your feet. By the time the Edwardian era ended, George had hung up his skates, and except for a few exhibitions, master classes, and judging appearances, he now focused on collecting fine art from Europe and elsewhere, becoming established as an art dealer in Toronto, and he was also a fine landscape painter in his own right. He was, as you said, in his 40s when he met and married Irene early in Toronto. And during their marriage of 17 years, they had 6 children, actually in the first 12 years, all bright, happy, and healthy. And while several of the daughters had his artistic talent, none of them, or us, inherited his exceptional athletic abilities. Their home in Toronto, and later in Montreal, was filled with beautiful paintings and pieces of art. George was a gentle and devoted father and husband, loving and enjoying his children, whom he was dedicated to raising in a proper and dignified household. He deplored any form of crudeness or vulgarity, and he disliked excessive ruckus like screaming and particularly slamming doors. They told me that his favorite times were Sunday evenings when he sat with his family in the parlor and played the piano and the banjo, quite well, I believe, and encouraged his children to sing favorite songs of the day. Apparently, he also had a very pleasant voice. His particular favorite when they were growing up was the sentimental ballad about Little Red Wing, which you may know. However, in March of 1930, at the age of 63, after a fierce, untreatable bout of pneumonia, George died quietly at home and was laid to rest in Montreal's Côte de Neige Cemetery, aptly enough in the family plot of his nephew, Art Farrell, who was himself a Canadian pioneer of hockey. His family, with 6 children, all under the age of 16 at that time, was devastated, but they persevered in life with the dignity and hard work that George would have expected of them. Throughout their lives, all his children carried much pride in and great love for their father. As for my grandmother Irene, she positively idolized George, and regularly in those little grandmotherly sermons would preface some remark by, "Your grandfather always used to say," and we'd hear her. Wisdom, of course. Even as a very old woman, Nanny Mar's eyes would still fill with tears whenever she heard music by Strauss, recalling the image of her beloved husband moving across the surface of the smooth candlelit ice as he glided and whirled, leapt effortlessly and gracefully to the blue Danube waltz. Over the last 125 years, our Canadian skaters and champions have consistently reached pinnacles of brilliant artistry and achieved athletic feats which would have been unimaginable in earlier times. I wish that George were here to see you now, and perhaps he is. On behalf of his descendants, thank you very much for allowing me to share tonight in this wonderful recognition of George Alfred Marr, my grandfather. Thank you.
in Ottawa, among the 89 other portraits of Hall of Fame members.
Now, I would like to just officially introduce to the Hall of Fame of Skate Canada, Mr. George Meagher.